Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a soldier, a spy, or some steely-eyed war hero marching through ticker tape and triumph. You're something far more necessary and far less remembered. You're a truck driver in World War II, the backbone of every front, the footnote of every victory, and the first to be blamed when anything arrives late, broken, or not at all. You'll crawl through snow, sand and jungle muck with a crate of ammo in the back and a failing transmission under your boots, all while praying your brakes outlive your nerves. You won't be honoured, you'll be exhausted, and then, eventually, forgotten. Before the engine seizes and the convoy leaves you behind, do me one small favour. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I find it fascinating to see who's tuning in from around the world. If you'd like early access to more of these slow-grinding descents into historical neglect, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable, let's begin. You're standing in line unsure why you're even here. The air smells like bleach, sweat, and something unplaceably sterile. The scent of institutional order trying to disguise its own incompetence. The man ahead of you has a cough that sounds wet enough to drown a cat, but no one says anything because everyone's pretending they're fine. That's what the military does best. Lie about being fine. You didn't wake up one morning and dream of diesel fumes and busted axles. You didn't tell your friends, I hope I get to drive rations through artillery fire and sleep under a tarp with my knees in the mud. No child grows up yearning to be the guy who brings the fuel but never gets to use it. You're not here because of ambition. You're here because of a form you filled out wrong, or a high school guidance counsellor who called you mechanically inclined. Because you once changed a tyre. Maybe you enlisted, maybe you got drafted, maybe you pissed off the wrong sergeant during basic and ended up volunteering for logistics. Doesn't matter. There are a dozen paths to this particular hell, and none of them are glamorous. You're not infantry. You're not airborne. You're not tank corps or reconnaissance. You're support. That's the polite word. The impolite word is disposable. The recruiter probably made it sound noble, essential even. You'll be keeping the army moving, they said, as if that made you part of the army. But when you arrived at training, they handed you a wrench instead of a rifle and told you to get familiar with an engine older than your grandmother. No tactics, no marksmanship, just oil changes, tyre pressure, and how to hotwire your own vehicle when the ignition fails for the 6th time in a week. Some of the men in your unit signed up to escape. Some were promised skills. Others just wanted out of the town they were born in, where the only jobs were digging holes or drinking yourself to death. The promise of 3 meals a day and a uniform that fit was enough to lure in a generation. They didn't tell you the meals would come in cans and the uniform would be damp for the duration of the war. And then there were the ones who didn't have a choice. Black soldiers, segregated, shuffled, and stuck where the army wanted them. Out of sight, off the front lines, and buried in logistics. The Red Ball Express didn't run on courage and optimism. It ran on the backs of black drivers hauling 10-ton loads down cratered French roads at night, with no headlights and no thanks. They were told their contribution mattered. Then they were told to eat separately, sleep separately, and die quietly. Even among the white troops, there's a pecking order. Officers don't drive. Artillerymen don't haul crates. Even cooks get more respect. At least they feed people. But transport? Transport is where they put the extras. The not quite broken, not quite useful, not quite trusted. If you were too clumsy for infantry, too smart-mouthed for command, or too unlucky to be anything else, they handed you a manifest and pointed at a truck. The training, if you can call it that, lasts just long enough to ensure you won't crash in the first 5 minutes. After that, you're on your own. They show you how to check the oil, shift without grinding the gears too much, and jam the brakes when they decide to work. They don't tell you what to do if the steering column snaps in the middle of a mountain pass. They don't explain how to spot mines or fix a ruptured fuel line in -10 degrees. That's not their concern. That's your problem now. You're processed with alarming speed. A doctor listens to your chest for 2 seconds and declares you alive. A clerk misspells your name on your paperwork and shrugs when you point it out. Your gear is handed to you in a sack that smells like someone else's sweat. Your boots don't fit. Your jacket is 2 sizes too large. The helmet rocks slightly every time you move, as if mocking the idea that it might ever protect your skull. They give you a number. They don't ask about your preferences. You try to explain that you have no experience with engines, that you once failed your driving test 3 times, that you get motion sick if you read while moving. None of it matters. The man at the desk glances at a list, frowns, then circles a word you can't quite read. Motor transport, he says. Rear line. Supply run. Report to the motorpool before dawn. And just like that, your fate is sealed. You walk out of the tent holding a flimsy folder of instructions and a set of keys that jingle ominously, like the beginning of a bad decision. You don't even know what kind of truck you'll be driving. No one tells you if it's got working brakes or if it's been scavenged for parts twice already. All you know is that you'll be expected to drive it, somewhere, often, and that if it breaks, you'd better know how to fix it, or at least look like you're trying while someone screams at you in a language you don't speak. Behind you, another man steps up to the desk, another name gets written down, another ghost in the making. You wonder how many of you they'll need. How many trucks? How many bodies to keep the tyres turning? You don't ask. You just nod, thank the sergeant who doesn't look up from his clipboard, and start walking toward the rows of dirty, sagging tents in the distance. You'll find your truck soon. For now, you're just another anonymous shape in a long line of exhausted men, moving toward the sound of engines that never quite stop running. You arrive at the depot just after dawn, though time has already lost most of its meaning. The sun is a pale smear behind low clouds, and everything around you feels wet. The air, the ground, your socks, your soul. Mud squelches under your boots with every step. Not the thick, heavy mud of farmland, but the churned-up filth of 1,000 tyres and boots passing over the same patch of earth, until it gave up and became soup. You step in something that might be oil, might be piss, might be both. No one reacts. The depot is chaos disguised as order. From the outside, it looks like a functional military hub. Rows of tents, trucks parked in jagged lines, crates stacked neatly enough to convince someone with poor eyesight that logistics are under control. But as you move further in, that illusion crumbles. A mechanic swears loudly over an engine that won't turn over. A corporal waves 2 drivers into the same parking space. A sergeant screams about fuel rations, but no one listens. You hear the word shortage more times in 5 minutes than you've heard your own name all week. There's shouting everywhere, not out of panic but out of necessity. Engines roar, tools clang, radios crackle with static, and half-finished orders. Men shout not because they're angry, but because it's the only way to be heard over the noise. You can't tell who's in charge. Rank blurs when everyone is equally filthy and equally exhausted. Officers try to look important, clipboards tucked under their arms, but even they can't hide the fact that this place is hanging together by whatever bits of wire and spite haven't snapped yet. You report to the motorpool and are immediately ignored. A line forms, but it doesn't move. Every time someone reaches the front, they're either yelled at, redirected, or handed a paper they don't understand. You watch one man get assigned to a truck that doesn't seem to exist. Another is told he's already on duty even though he just arrived. No one seems surprised. A system this broken doesn't shock anyone anymore. It just limps forward on habit. Eventually, someone notices you. A staff sergeant with 3 days of stubble and a coffee stain on his shirt. He doesn't ask your name. He just points at a clipboard and barks something that sounds like Slot 15. You nod, pretending that means something. You ask where that is. He points in 3 different directions and walks away. You find the tent that passes for the driver's briefing area. It's dark, damp, and smells like wet wool and cigarette ash. Inside are a dozen other men, all slumped in folding chairs that look ready to collapse. No one speaks unless they have to. A few glance up when you enter, then return to staring at the floor. They all look older than you, even the ones who aren't. Not old in years. Old in the way wood cracks when it's been left out in the weather too long. One man is missing half an eyebrow. Another clutches a thermos like it's the only thing anchoring him to reality. You sit. You wait. No one tells you what for. Eventually, a young lieutenant storms in with a sheaf of papers and the frantic energy of someone who's been put in charge of a task he doesn't understand. He starts reading names and destinations with the confidence of a man hoping no one asks questions. Some of the locations you recognise from maps, others sound made up. Clusters of letters that someone once called a village before the war flattened it. You're assigned to a route you don't remember volunteering for, not that anyone asked. You're told it's safe enough, which means it's only been shelled once this week. The load is marked priority, which could mean ammunition or toilet paper. No one clarifies. Your instructions are mumbled and vague. Deliver the cargo. Don't stop. Don't delay. Don't ask what's in it. You'll be part of a convoy, though no one tells you how many trucks that includes or who's leading it. Someone tries to hand you a radio. It's broken. You hand it back. They shrug. Just stay close to the guy in front of you. That's your entire communications protocol. Stay close and hope. You nod because that seems to be the only acceptable response. A vague map is shoved into your hands. A series of barely legible lines and symbols drawn on something that might have once been part of a cereal box. There are no landmarks, no compass rose, no indication of scale. One of the roads is marked with a skull and crossbones in pencil. You decide not to ask. Gear is handed out haphazardly. You get a rusted helmet, a mouldy canvas poncho, and a revolver that may or may not work. No one offers extra socks. No one explains what to do if your truck catches fire. A sergeant begins shouting about brake checks and fuel logs, but it's mostly ignored. You hear the same conversation repeated 3 times in different accents. Someone forgot their cargo manifest. Someone else lost their keys. Someone else found a rat in their glove compartment and named it Major Squeaks. Finally, your name is called, or something close enough to it that you respond. You're led past rows of trucks in various states of disrepair, some stripped for parts, some held together with rope and prayer. The one you're assigned is technically operational, if you use that term loosely. The paint is peeling. The tyres are bald. The rear axle makes a sound like a wounded animal when you shift weight. There's a smear of something unidentifiable on the seat. The passenger door doesn't open from the inside. You climb into the cab, clutching your satchel and your pointless map, and try to get comfortable. The seat springs stab into your back. The dashboard is cracked. The windshield is fogged from the inside and won't clear. You check the glove box and find a bent spoon, 2 cigarette butts, and a scrap of paper with the words, "Don't trust the chicken," scrawled in all caps. You decide to leave that mystery unsolved. Outside, the rest of the convoy begins to stir. Engines cough and wheeze to life. Men climb into their trucks without speaking. The lead vehicle rumbles forward. A corporal slaps your window and gestures for you to follow. No one explains what to do if you get separated, or lost, or hit a mine. No one tells you what to do if you break down. You turn the key. The engine sputters. For a moment you think it's going to die. Then it growls, angry and uneven, but alive. You shift into gear, feel the truck lurch forward, and ease into line behind the man ahead of you. That's your only instruction. Follow, keep up, don't die. And so you begin. Your first convoy takes you through northern France, though through is a generous word. It feels less like movement, and more like constant battle with the road, the weather, and the truck itself. You follow the taillights ahead of you, or you would if anyone was allowed to use lights. Blackout conditions mean no headlights, no lamps, no cigarettes, unless cupped in your hand and turned away from the wind. You drive in darkness so complete you can't see your own hands on the wheel. You steer by instinct and guesswork, always a second away from sliding into a ditch or ramming the truck in front of you. The roads are narrow and cratered, winding through fields that still smell like gunpowder. Charred trees line the horizon. Burned out tanks and abandoned carts sit in roadside ditches like warnings. You pass villages that aren't really villages anymore, just hollowed shells of buildings with a curtain still fluttering in broken windows. Every so often, you spot a church steeple, half collapsed, silhouetted against a moonless sky. It looks like a tombstone. Your shifts are 24 hours. Technically, you're supposed to drive for 16 and sleep for 8, but in practice, no one sleeps. You drive until your eyes blur and your shoulders lock up. Then someone slaps your shoulder and tells you to go again. There's no relief. There's only rotation. Some men drive with one eye open. Others tie their wrists to the wheel just in case. You hear of one guy who kept a fork in his pocket and jabbed his thigh whenever he nodded off. Everyone's got their trick. None of them work for long. You learn early that rules don't apply on the Red Ball Express. Speed limits are ignored. Right of way doesn't exist. You blow through crossroads without slowing. If another truck's in your lane, you lean on the horn and pray they swerve first. Convoys take priority over everything. Civilian vehicles, local traffic, even ambulances, all told to wait. Because what you're carrying isn't just supplies, it's the war itself. Fuel, bullets, bandages. If it doesn't get where it's going, someone dies. Not that they thank you, not that they remember. Most of the drivers you meet aren't white. The Red Ball Express is built on black labour. Over 75% of the drivers are African American, men pushed out of combat roles, kept in segregated units, and handed the worst routes with the worst equipment. They're called support, like it's a compliment. What it means is invisible, disposable, useful until broken. They sleep in separate tents, eat in separate messes, can't use the same latrines. They're given the oldest trucks, the least fuel, and the highest risk assignments. And if something goes wrong, the paperwork already assumes it was their fault, but they keep driving. They fix what they're given. They work twice as hard for half the recognition, knowing that when the war ends, they'll go home to neighbourhoods that still hang whites-only signs on the windows. You drive alongside these men, listen to them trade jokes and curses and horror stories over tin mugs of coffee that tastes like burnt cloth. Some have been at it for weeks, others for months. They teach you how to feel the road through the wheel, how to know by sound when an axle is about to snap. They show you how to patch a tyre with burlap and wire, how to angle your truck to block wind when you're changing out a dead starter in the middle of the night. They don't have to help you, but they do. At one point, you pull into a temporary stop, a patch of dirt wide enough to park 10 trucks and not much else. A corporal walks by handing out sandwiches, stale bread, and something grey that might be meat. You're starving, so you eat it anyway. One of the black drivers, a tall man with cracked knuckles and a laugh like gravel, pulls a harmonica from his coat and plays a tune so mournful it makes the trees seem quieter. No one speaks while he plays. When he finishes, he tucks it back in his pocket, climbs into his truck, and starts the engine like it never happened. Back on the road, your convoy stretches for miles. You can't see the beginning or the end. Just endless silhouettes, rumbling forward, wheels grinding against frost and broken stone. The night air is sharp enough to sting your throat. The windows don't seal properly, so you wrap your scarf tighter and try not to think about how far you still have to go. Your truck is starting to complain. The brakes hiss whenever you press them. The clutch sticks. One of the rear tyres wobbles in a way that makes you nervous. You can feel the frame flex under load whenever you hit a pothole, which is every 30 feet. You're running on parts that should have been replaced 3 months ago, and fuel that smells like it's been thinned with kerosene. But you keep going, because stopping isn't an option. If you stop, you get left behind. Somewhere along the way, a mortar shell lands half a mile to your left. You don't see the explosion, just a flash. a sound like the earth coughing, and then the fire. The convoy doesn't stop. You don't even slow down. That's not your problem. That's someone else's problem now. You drive faster. The sun comes up again, or maybe it never went down. You've lost track. Your eyes are crusted with dust. Your hands are numb. The road finally widens, and you see the outlines of a depot through the fog. Trucks peel off in different directions, honking once before they disappear, between rows of tents and shipping crates. You follow a sign that says, "Unload here," in crooked paint, and turn the wheel. As you approach the depot gate, your brakes give out. Not all at once, not a dramatic cinematic failure, but in pieces. A long, slow sigh of resistance giving way. You feel the pedal go soft. You press harder. The truck doesn't slow. You yank the handbrake and hear it snap. All you can do is aim for the mud and pray. You skid into the depot at an angle, narrowly avoiding a stack of crates and two startled mechanics. The truck shudders to a halt, lurches once, and dies with a groan. Steam rises from the hood. Something under the chassis clanks to the ground. You sit there, breathing heavily, waiting for someone to scream at you. But no one does. A corporal jogs over, glances at the smoking engine, and mutters something about typical. He points to a fuel pump. "Refill and get back on the road," he says. "Return legs waiting." You open your mouth to protest, but he's already walking away. Another driver pulls in behind you. The line never stops. The war doesn't pause. And you are not here to rest. You are here to drive. Your next assignment isn't in Europe. It's somewhere hotter, wetter, and crueler. A place where the war doesn't feel like a grand strategy or a clash of empires, but like slow rot, stretching across mountains and monsoons, eating everything in its path. You don't know much about Burma. You didn't know it was a country, really. Just a shape on a map with a name that sounded too gentle for what you were about to experience. They say it's strategic, they say it's vital. You'll come to associate it with nothing but mud, sickness, and the sound of rain hitting canvas for hours on end. The Burma Road isn't really a road. It's a suggestion, a jagged scar carved through jungle and mountain by desperation and forced labour. It winds like a dying snake between Kunming and Lashio, looping through impossible terrain where nothing should drive. Least of all, a military transport truck, groaning under the weight of fuel drums and crates of rusting ammunition. The route is narrow enough to make two-way traffic suicidal. On one side, rock wall. On the other, a vertical drop into mist. There are no guardrails. There is no margin for error. You thought the rutted lanes of northern France were bad. You thought potholes and mud were bad. Then you hit your first Burmese switchback in pouring rain, with your tyres sliding on slick red clay and visibility reduced to whatever you can glimpse through a windshield smeared with sweat and insect guts. You can't slow down. There's no shoulder to pull over on. And you can't stop. The man behind you will just plough into your rear axle. You drive forward, breath held, knuckles white, heart thudding in your ears. It's not courage. It's inertia. The rain doesn't stop. Not for minutes, not for hours. Days go by where you never see the sky, just sheets of water hammering down like the jungle itself is trying to wash the war away. Tents rot, boots squish. Clothes never dry. They cling to your back like wet leaves, plastered with sweat and mildew. You develop rashes in places you didn't know could chafe. Your socks become petri dishes. You wring water from your blanket each night before trying and failing to sleep beneath it. The jungle is alive, but not in any welcoming sense. It buzzes, hums, screams with insects that want your blood, and fungus that wants your skin. There are leeches in the mud, spiders in your boots. A rat chewed through your rations last night and died immediately, which doesn't exactly inspire confidence in what you're about to eat. You kill time swatting flies from your face and scratching the parts of your body that haven't gone numb from fatigue. Malaria isn't just a rumour, it's a guarantee. You've seen grown men piss themselves from the shaking. You've seen others try to sweat it out under two coats and a blanket, shivering so hard their teeth chatter in time with the rain. You take your quinine like clockwork, and still the fever finds you. You learn to recognise the look in someone's eyes when the chills set in. You see it in the mirror, eventually. Then there's the dysentery. The less said, the better. Just know that there is no dignity in crouching behind a tree while a line of trucks honks impatiently behind you. There is no glamour in combat diarrhea. You learn to ration your toilet paper like it's ammunition. You learn that certain foods are a death sentence, and that even clean water isn't a guarantee of safety. You boil everything. You still get sick. You're not alone in this mess. Chinese labourers line the route, many of them conscripted by the Kuomintang, given shovels, and told to keep the road clear. Some walk barefoot. Some carry supplies on their backs. You pass them without making eye contact, because you don't know what to say to someone who's literally hauling the war uphill. They don't salute, they don't smile, they just keep walking. One collapses beside your truck, face down in the mud. He doesn't get back up. No one stops. Allied coordination is a joke. The British command doesn't talk to the Americans. The Americans don't trust the Chinese. Everyone blames everyone else for the breakdowns, the delays, the chaos. Orders come late, or not at all. Maps contradict each other. 1 week you're told to deliver to a depot that no longer exists. The next, you're stuck waiting 3 days for a bridge that was supposed to be finished last month. When it's finally usable, it collapses under the first truck that tries to cross. Your truck doesn't like the heat. The engine vapour locks on inclines. The fuel gauge is wrong half the time, and the other half is just lying. The brakes overheat. The wheels seize. You spend more time under the truck than in it, trying to clear out gunked up filters and coax life back into a motor that clearly wants to die. You improvise a fan belt out of spare canvas. It holds for an hour, then snaps. You get used to the sound of trucks slipping off the edge. It starts with a groan of shifting metal. Then comes the scream, engine, man, or both, and the thud you feel in your stomach. You don't stop. You can't. There's no room to pull over. The jungle closes over the wreckage in minutes. Vines will reclaim it. Trees will grow through it. In a few months, no one will know it was ever there. You stop caring about rank. You stop caring about orders. You care about the route, the wheels, and the inches in front of your bumper. Nothing else matters. One morning, a major tries to flag you down for a new assignment. You drive right past him. He doesn't yell. He just watches you go. He understands. By week's end, your nerves are shot. You're running on weak coffee and damp cigarettes. You dream about being dry. That's it. Not home, not peace. Just a moment where you're not soaked through. Your stomach twists every time the wheels hit a rut. Your teeth ache from the vibration. The wheel jerks in your hands with every bump, like the truck resents being steered. It happens on a downhill curve, steep, slick, and sharper than expected. You tap the brakes, nothing. You pump them, still nothing. The truck fishtails, your hands yanking the wheel in reflex. The rear end slides, skids, lifts slightly, and slams down hard. The front tyres dip into a rut and lurch sideways, spinning the whole vehicle in a graceless spiral before the weight catches up and sends it careening into a shallow ditch. You hit your head on the door frame. Something metal gashes your leg. The engine sputters, then dies. Steam hisses from the radiator. Rain beats against the windshield, indifferent. You crawl out through the passenger side, dragging your bleeding leg behind you. You're soaked. You're shaking. You're burning with fever. Mud clings to every inch of skin, and you can taste blood in the back of your throat. Convoy trucks pass you in slow, splashing succession. No one stops. No one honks. They just keep moving. Because that's the job. You don't remember how long you lay there in the ditch. Minutes, maybe. Hours. Long enough for the fever to throb behind your eyes and the leeches to find the soft parts of your skin. Eventually, someone stopped. Not to help, not exactly, but to clear the road. 2 locals dragged you out of the mud, like you were part of the wreckage. and dumped you in the back of a supply truck, headed in the opposite direction. From there, it was a blur of bandages, shouted orders, and reassignments signed by people who never looked you in the eye. After 2 months spent in Burma, you've been transferred again. Welcome to Russia, the part of the war where cold isn't just weather, it's a weapon. You thought you knew winter, you didn't. European winters are wet and miserable. Russian winters are biblical. They don't just chill your skin, they reach into your bones and whisper promises that you're not going to survive this one. You arrive bundled in 3 layers of wool, and it still feels like standing naked in a meat locker. The wind doesn't blow here, it slices. There's no gentle introduction. Your orders are waiting when you disembark, printed on paper so brittle from the cold, it crumbles at the edges. A Soviet officer with a face like chipped granite barks at you in clipped Russian. You don't understand most of it, but the tone is clear. Drive or die. The convoy is already late, already behind schedule, already low on everything except frostbite and bad tempers. You're handed a map with 3 locations scratched onto it in pencil. One's been crossed out. No one explains why. The road, if you can call it that, stretches like a scar across an endless plain of ice. There's no shoulder, no signs, no indication you're even going the right direction. The snow is deceptive, smoothing over landmines, potholes, and the corpses of trucks that didn't make the last run. Trees line the edges like skeletal spectators. Some have shrapnel embedded in them. Others are splintered where shells have passed. Everything else is white and still. Too still. Your truck has seen better decades. The engine protests every morning, like it's trying to sue you for abuse. You have to light a small fire under the oil pan, just to coax it into motion. The tyres are wrapped in chains, not for traction, but to stop them from freezing flat to the road overnight. The windshield is a thick smear of frost. You scrape at it with a knife, because the defroster hasn't worked since Leningrad. You don't remember what it feels like to sweat. Fuel becomes your obsession, not just using it, but keeping it warm enough to stay liquid. It thickens in the lines, gums up the filter, turns to sludge if left alone too long. You sleep with a canister by your side like it's a pet, keeping it wrapped and close to the fire so you can pour it without chipping it out like soup stock. The engines are temperamental, even on the best of days. Now they wheeze like dying men and stall, if you so much as think about coasting downhill. You learn quickly to keep your face covered. Exposed skin goes grey in minutes. One driver loses half his nose on a smoke break. Another pulls off a glove for 10 seconds and comes back with fingers the colour of raw pork. You wrap your feet in old newspaper and stuff straw into your boots. It doesn't help. Nothing helps. Cold this deep gets into your teeth. Your joints ache. Your breath freezes on your collar, forming a brittle crust you have to chip off every few hours just to breathe properly. You sleep in short, shivering bursts whenever the convoy stops. Curled up in the cab, boots still on, arms wrapped around your chest, like you're trying to hold your ribs in place. Some men lash themselves to the wheel so they don't slump forward and accidentally press the gas. Others tie bits of cloth to their eyelids so they snap open if they start to close. You jab yourself in the thigh with a pencil, again and again, just to stay awake. One guy down the line ties a string around his finger and the gear shift. If he starts to nod, the tug wakes him. It works until it doesn't. Communication is a mess, radios freeze, batteries drain in minutes, orders are passed by shouting, and voices don't carry well through scarves and snow. Sometimes you follow a truck for hours only to realise it's going in the wrong direction. Other times your lead vehicle simply disappears, swallowed by a storm, or a crater, or the horizon itself. You learn not to panic. You just keep driving, or stop and wait, or freeze to death. The options are flexible in that they're all terrible. The Soviets don't believe in coddling. You're given your route and told to complete it. No escort, no backup, no real explanation. If you return, good. If you don't, another truck will be along eventually. Probably. You don't speak the language, but you don't need to. Misery is universal. Nods, grunts, and glares work fine. The Russian drivers treat you like a curiosity at first, then like a fellow sufferer, eventually, like one of their own. Brotherhood born of mutual frostbite and shared cigarette butts. The cargo is always vital and always vague. Shells, bandages, rifles, radio parts. You don't know, and it doesn't matter. What matters is getting it there, wherever there is today. The roads aren't roads so much as suggestions etched into snowbanks. Half the time you're steering more by memory than visibility. The other half, you're just following ruts and hoping the last guy didn't drive off a cliff. You pass wreckage regularly. Trucks blackened by fire, frames twisted into grotesque sculptures, bits of tarp flapping like flags of surrender. You see a convoy that never made it. 3 vehicles in a frozen ditch, a trail of footprints leading away and vanishing into the trees. No one says a word. You keep driving. You don't stop for wrecks. You don't stop for bodies. You stop when your engine does. And even then, only long enough to curse at it. The wind cuts through your coat like it's not even there. You start to forget what warmth felt like. Your hands stop working properly. The fingers clumsy, slow, stiff with cold. One morning, you drop a wrench and it takes you 5 full minutes to pick it back up. Your breath fogs the inside of your scarf and then freezes there, a crust of ice that hardens against your lips. When you speak, it's in short bursts, more grunts than language. Words cost too much heat. On one particularly frigid morning, your truck refuses to start. No spark, no turnover, just a dull clicking sound, like a dying heartbeat. You open the hood with numb fingers and realise the oil is frozen solid in the pan. You try to chip it loose, then give up and do what everyone else does. You build a fire under the engine. Real flames, real wood, real risk of exploding your own fuel line. And no one cares. That's how it's done out here. The flames lick at the bottom of the truck. You crouch nearby, hands held out, not for the truck's sake, but for your own. Your gloves are wet and stiff. Your fingers are so swollen and red, you wonder if they'll ever bend again. You try to rub some life into them, but they barely respond. The cold has gotten deep now. Not just into the skin, but into your blood, into your thoughts. The fire is barely sputtering out when a Soviet officer approaches from the rear. His coat is immaculate. His boots crunch across the snow, like authority. He doesn't stop. He doesn't speak. He just gestures, sharp, impatient, and points down the road. You look at your hands, still struggling to close around the wheel. You look at the fire. You look at the endless road ahead, and you start the engine. Because there is no alternative. You spent 5 months in Russia. 5 months of ice-cracked skin, frozen engines, and waking up each morning, unsure if your fingers would still bend. Long enough for the cold to settle into your joints, like permanent tenants. Long enough for your breath to stop fogging, not because the air got warmer, but because your body stopped trying. By the time they pulled you off the line, you'd forgotten what trees looked like with leaves. You've been in the war nearly 2 years now, long enough to forget how silence sounds. They didn't send you home, they sent you south. One day you're thawing diesel with a blowtorch, and the next you're squinting into sun glare, standing beside a truck that's hot enough to burn your palm on the door. Russia took your warmth. North Africa takes your water. You were never supposed to be shuffled around this much. Wrong paperwork, wrong name, wrong war. You kept ending up where no one else wanted to go. The sea crossing is uneventful, unless you count the vomiting, the overcrowding, and the creeping dread that maybe this time you've been sent somewhere worse. When you dock, the heat hits you like a slap. It's not the heavy, sticky kind you knew back home, or even the steaming, fever-drenched misery of Burma. This is a dry, biting heat, the kind that cracks your lips by mid-morning and makes your skin feel like it's been stretched too tight over your bones. You don't sweat here. You leak. The roads are mostly theoretical. wide open spaces of endless sand interrupted by patches of rock, and the occasional half-buried landmine. Sometimes you follow tracks carved into the dirt by convoys that came before you. Sometimes the wind erases those tracks mid-route, and you find yourself navigating by compass, instinct, and dumb luck. Maps are a joke, outdated, vague, and wildly optimistic. Distances are marked not in miles, but in how many tyres you'll go through to get there. Your truck hates the desert more than you do. The engine overheats before you've cleared the first ridge. The radiator boils like a kettle, hissing steam every time you idle too long. You check the coolant, it's gone. You check the reserve, also gone. When you ask for more, you're laughed at. Improvise, says the mechanic, who's too sunburned to care and too dehydrated to fake sympathy. So you do what everyone else does. You piss into the radiator. It doesn't fix the problem, but it delays the inevitable. That's the theme of the desert. Nothing works, and everything dies slowly. The sand gets into everything. Your boots, your teeth, your food, your bedroll. It clogs the air filter, chews up the fan belt, turns engine grease into a gritty paste that wears down metal like sandpaper. You wrap cloth around the intake just to buy yourself a few more miles before the whole system seizes again. You clean it constantly, and still it builds up. By week's end, the inside of your ears feel like they're lined with gravel. Your socks are ruined. Your skin rubs raw at every seam. You drink what you can, when you can. The water is hot, metallic, and usually filled with enough sediment to make you consider chewing it before you swallow. You ration your canteen like it's sacred, one sip at a time, swirled in your mouth to trick your body into thinking it's been satisfied. Some days you don't urinate at all. Other days it's the colour of rust. You feel your body getting lighter, not in a good way, but in the way of something slowly drying out. You stop sweating altogether. That's when you know you're in trouble. Sunstroke hits men fast out here. 1 minute they're squinting into the glare, the next they're stumbling off the side of the road, muttering nonsense about snow. You see a driver collapse face first into the sand. When you pull him up, his eyes are glassy and unfocused. You pour water on his head. What's left of it, anyway? And he starts screaming. The heat's cooked his scalp. There's nothing to do but drag him into the shade of the truck and pray it passes. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. You get good at scavenging. Everyone does. Spare parts are rare, and new ones practically mythical. You swap brake pads with other drivers, share bolts, jury rig everything from scraps. Someone makes a fan out of old ration tins. Someone else carves a gear lever from a broom handle. When a convoy gets hit, the survivors pick through the wreckage like vultures. Not for the dead, but for the fenders, belts and spark plugs that might still be usable. You see a man sob with joy after finding a functioning starter. It's the first real luck he's had all month. Then there are the air raids. You learn the sound of enemy planes long before you see them. The growing whine of engines against a clear sky. There's nowhere to hide. No trees, no hills. Just you, your truck, and a vast open plain with all the subtlety of a shooting gallery. The first time it happens, you panic. You try to outrun it. The second time, you dive under the chassis and hope they miss. By the third, you don't even flinch. You just crouch beside a tyre and mutter the words to a prayer you don't believe in. They drop bombs mostly on supply dumps and depots, but sometimes they aim for the convoys too. Not because you're a threat, but because you're easy, stationary, predictable. You hear the explosions before you feel them. The shockwaves hit a second later, sending sand whipping through the cab like a hurricane. Trucks flip. Fires start. Screaming fills the air and gets muffled by the distance, swallowed by the dunes. You keep your head down and don't move. Later, when the noise stops, you get back behind the wheel and keep driving. You see mirages so often you stop reacting. A shimmer on the horizon that looks like water. A shape that might be a palm tree. Once you swear you saw a gas station, pumps, signage, the whole thing, standing in the middle of nowhere. You blink, and it's gone. Your brain's starting to fry. Your thoughts move slow, like they're wading through syrup. You forget what day it is. You forget where you are, but your hands still find the wheel, and your foot still presses the clutch. Weeks pass. You're still in North Africa, parked in a patch of cracked earth that pretends to be flat, crouched beside a truck that shouldn't be running but somehow still is. You're under the hood again, sleeves rolled up, hands black with grease, sand in your teeth, and just enough shade from a boulder to keep your scalp from blistering. The sun hasn't moved in hours, neither have you. You've been here long enough to stop sweating. That's the warning sign, you think. The point where your body starts hoarding moisture, like it's prepping for extinction. You patch the engine with wire, torn canvas, and a bit of luck that should have run out weeks ago. A cracked fuel line has been stitched together with rubber cut from your boot heel. A belt is replaced with braided twine, soaked in oil to keep it from snapping immediately. Everything you do is temporary. Emergency fixes to emergency fixes. You don't maintain the truck anymore. You just keep it from dying long enough to get to the next hill. And then you hope gravity does the rest. It's not a vehicle anymore. It's a mobile death rattle on wheels. The frame creaks like an old man's back every time you climb in. The cab smells like sun-baked metal, sweat, and the ghosts of 100 panicked drivers who've screamed at it and slapped the dashboard in vain. You're the latest in a long line of men who've tried to coax meaning from its rusted carcass. And you won't be the last. No one is sentimental about it. The truck has no name. It hasn't earned one. The tyres are all wrong for the desert. The treads are worn down to bald patches. The rubber dry and splitting from the heat. One tyre has a gash patched with tar and rope. Another has been reinforced with strips of tin hammered flat and nailed into place. A medieval solution to a mechanical problem. There's no spare anymore, just a rim strapped to the back like a taunt. Every jolt threatens to shear a bolt. Every corner is a gamble. You've grown used to the wobble. You even adjust for it automatically. But you know it's just a matter of time. The radiator leaks so steadily, it may as well be a sieve. You've poured everything into it. Water, coffee, engine oil, urine. Once, when things got desperate, you tried camel milk. It curdled instantly. You've stuffed rags into the hose, sealed cracks with wax from a melted candle, and siphoned coolant from other trucks under the cover of darkness. Nothing holds. The fluid always finds a way to escape. You drive with one eye on the temperature gauge and the other on the rising column of steam. It's not a matter of if it overheats, it's when. The brakes are the worst. Always the brakes. They never work when they're supposed to. On flat terrain, they're lazy, slow to respond, spongy underfoot. On slopes, they vanish entirely. There's no warning. No grinding, no squeal. Just silence and acceleration. You've tried pumping them. You've tried downshifting early. You've tried prayer. None of it stops a truck this heavy once it's decided to pick up speed. You keep a rock under the seat just in case. A crude wedge for when all else fails. There's no suspension to speak of. You feel every pebble, every rut, every hardened ridge of wind-blown sand, as if the road is trying to climb up into your spine. The seat is bent sideways from too many forced landings. The padding is long gone. You sit on a rolled-up blanket that smells like diesel and despair. After every trip, your back screams, your legs cramp, and your arms feel like you've been clinging to a bucking animal for days. Because you have. The truck fights you constantly, like it resents being steered by human hands. The cabin is an oven during the day and a wind tunnel at night. The glass rattles in the frames. The passenger side door doesn't latch properly and sometimes swings open on rough turns. You keep it shut with a length of rope tied to the gear stick. The windshield is sand-pitted and smeared from the inside with grime you've given up trying to clean. You drive half-blind most of the time, squinting through a narrow strip of visibility that shifts every few miles. The wipers don't work, the knobs are broken, the motor hums uselessly when you turn it. There's no radio, not even a dummy unit. If you break down in the open desert, and you will, You fix it yourself or wait for someone to notice you're missing. That could take hours, could take days. Convoys don't circle back for stragglers. You know this. You've seen the vultures already circling the horizon while you tighten bolts with shaking hands. Once you passed a burned-out truck, half buried in a dune. The cab scorched black, its tyres melted flat into the sand. No one had bothered to mark it. It wasn't even listed on the manifest. The cargo you're hauling today is marked priority. It always is. You stopped asking what was in the crates after one burst open and turned out to be full of spoiling meat packed in straw. Another was filled with boots, all left-footed, another with broken rifles marked salvage. Once you hauled several tons of radio parts to a camp that had already been abandoned. You're never told what's in the back, only that it's important enough to die for, but not important enough to protect. You slam the hood shut and lean against the grill, breath shallow, hands burning from the heat radiating off the metal. You've used up your last spare part. The water's low. Your wrists ache from turning a wrench that should have been replaced a month ago. You're coated in oil and dust. Your skin tastes like salt and copper, and the convoy is already pulling away. You hear the engines in the distance, a rising grumble that says, "Move." Now you scramble into the cab, kick the starter, and the engine stutters, coughs, and finally growls to life, reluctant, resentful. You shift into gear and ease forward, wheels kicking up clouds of sand that whirl around the chassis like smoke. You fall into place near the back of the line, watching the horizon shimmer with heat and illusion. You haven't slept in 2 days. Not properly, not in the way that counts. You've nodded off in fits and starts, slumped against the wheel, chin on your chest, boots still pressed to the floor. But every time your eyes close, something pulls them open again. The whine of the engine, the lurch of the suspension, the sound of gunfire in the distance, real or imagined. You're not sure anymore. All you know is that your body is beginning to fail in quiet, irreversible ways. Your hands shake on the wheel, not from fear, not from cold, but from exhaustion so deep it feels cellular. Your joints ache with a slow bruising fatigue that no amount of stretching fixes. Every bump in the road sends pain through your spine, like an electric shock. Your legs cramp, your fingers lose grip, and your head is full of fog, thick and heavy, like wet wool stuffed behind your eyes. Thoughts don't connect. Words drift through your mind like ash and vanish before you can hold them. You try to remember the last time you lay down and didn't immediately get back up. You think it was in Russia, in a barn with broken shutters and frost creeping across the floor. Or maybe Burma, in a pit carved out of wet earth, where every breath tasted like mildew and rot. You've lost time before, here and there, a few minutes stolen by micro-naps. But this is different. You're beginning to dream while your eyes are still open. It starts small, shapes at the edge of your vision that disappear when you turn to look. A face in the passenger seat that you swear wasn't there a second ago. A rustling sound behind the cab when you're driving alone across an open plain. You tell yourself it's just the wind, just the heat, just the rumble of the engine echoing strangely. You tell yourself it's fine, that you're just tired, that everyone sees things out here. And you're right, they do. One driver tied a bell to his sleeve so he'd hear it if he started to doze. It didn't work. He died wrapped around the rear axle of the truck in front of him. Another kept a lit cigarette between his fingers at all times, thinking the burn would wake him. It didn't. He dropped it, lit the cab on fire, and didn't make it out. You start carrying a handful of pebbles in your pocket. When your eyes start to close, you squeeze one until your palm bleeds. It helps until it doesn't. The road doesn't care, it keeps going. Straight, featureless, endless. A ribbon of gravel or dirt or cracked tarmac, changing only in shade, never in shape. Your brain starts filling in the blanks. You see things that aren't there. A farmhouse in the distance, a man waving a red flag, a telephone pole that turns into a soldier. The heat shimmer bends light into faces, bodies, motion. You blink and it's gone. Or it isn't. Sometimes you don't know the difference. You start forgetting basic things, how to shift gears, where you're going, what day it is. You forget your rank, your name, the face of the man who handed you the map this morning. You forget where the convoy started and where it's supposed to end. All that matters now is the truck ahead of you and the few meters of road between you and it. That becomes your entire universe. If it swerves, you swerve. If it stops, you stop. If it drives off a cliff, you'll probably follow. Your mouth is dry. Your lips are cracked. Every time you swallow, it feels like dragging sandpaper down your throat. You haven't eaten in hours, maybe days. You found a stale biscuit in your coat pockets and chewed it until it turned to paste. But it didn't help. You tried drinking from your canteen, but the water was hot and tasted like old metal. You poured it over your face instead, just to feel something. It evaporated in seconds. Your neck snaps back. For a moment, you don't know why. Then you realise you nodded off and hit a rut in the road. The jolt woke you. Your hands weren't even on the wheel. You grip it now, like a lifeline, knuckles white, veins raised. You roll the window down and stick your head out into the wind, letting the air sting your face. It helps, briefly. Then the tiredness comes back. Heavier, more insistent. Your eyelids droop. Your head dips forward again. You try music, a harmonica someone left behind in the glove box. You blow into it off key, again and again, until your breath runs out. You talk to yourself, out loud. You insult the truck. You plead with it. You curse your commanding officer by name. You tell stories no one else is around to hear. About your childhood, about a girl you knew, about the time you wanted to be a teacher. Your voice sounds strange, disconnected, like someone else is speaking through your mouth. Then you see something that stops your heart. A child standing in the middle of the road, small, unmoving, hair ruffling slightly in the wind. You slam the brakes. The truck skids. The tires scream. You shut your eyes, ready for impact, and then open them again to find the road empty. No child. No figure. Just dust and gravel stretching to the horizon. You don't know if it was a dream, a hallucination, or a memory. You check the rearview mirror. Nothing. You start laughing. Quietly at first, then louder, until it turns into coughing. Your chest rattles. Your ribs ache. You slap the wheel and keep driving. At some point, the sun shifts. The shadows change. You've been following the same truck for hours, Wag. Maybe the same truck. Maybe not. They all look the same now. You can't remember if you've seen this section of road before, or if your mind is recycling old scenery, like a film on loop. You try to count the bumps, the signs, the turns, but you lose track by 10. Your eyes close again, just for a second, just a moment, and then you're yanked back by a surge of panic, the shape ahead of you growing fast, too fast. You stomp the brake pedal and twist the wheel, just in time, to avoid rear-ending the truck in front of you. The tyres scream. The frame bucks. You lurch forward, forehead smacking the steering wheel, teeth clacking together, hard enough to bite your tongue. You sit there for a second, heart pounding, breath shallow. You glance around, confused. You don't remember slowing down. You don't remember falling asleep. But you did. And next time, you might not wake up in time. You're back on the road. The sun is low behind you, the heat finally easing, and for the first time in days you almost feel human again. The convoy is moving smoothly, engines rumbling in rhythm, and the sky above is a soft wash of pink and gold. You can breathe without coughing. The truck hasn't broken down yet. The road, while dusty and pitted, is holding together. You even manage to choke down a biscuit and a few sips of water without retching. For a dangerous, fleeting moment, you let yourself believe this run might actually be easy. Not safe, nothing is safe, but tolerable. You even hum a little, tunelessly, under your breath, something you half remember from before the war. The man in the truck ahead of you waves lazily out the window. Not an emergency signal, not a warning, just a bored gesture. You wave back. It's been quiet for too long, and part of you knows that, but you ignore the feeling. You want to believe the worst has passed, that you're just hauling crates through a bad sunset in a quiet stretch of nowhere, that maybe you'll make it to the depot without anything going wrong. Then the sky changes, not slowly, not with warning. It just changes. One moment it's open and peaceful, the next it's screaming. You hear it before you see it. A deep low hum that turns into a shriek, too loud to be wind, too fast to be anything on the ground. Then come the shadows, long, sharp, and wrong. You look up just in time to see the black belly of a dive bomber banking overhead, its underside painted with a symbol you've come to associate with very bad things. You slam your foot down and wrench the wheel, but there's nowhere to go. You're already exposed. You were always exposed. The first bomb hits somewhere ahead. The shockwave ripples through the earth, lifting your front wheels an inch off the ground. Your teeth slam together. Your chest knocks against the wheel. A second explosion follows, Ketoi, closer, sharper. You hear screaming, but it's distant, drowned out by the roar of engines and the hammering of your heart. You duck instinctively, even though you know it won't help. You have no armour, no canopy, just a thin sheet of rusted metal between you and everything falling from the sky. You're not a target, not really. You're an afterthought, but that doesn't make you safe. In fact, it makes you more vulnerable, because you're not important enough to protect. You're told to keep going, always. The orders are simple: do not stop, do not get out, do not engage. The cargo matters more than you do, even if that cargo is socks. You spot movement in the hills to your right. Something glints, then cracks, the windshield spiderwebs. You hear a ping, a hiss, and realise someone is shooting at you. Not from a plane this time, from the ground. A sniper, maybe two. You duck again, clutching the wheel like it might offer some kind of divine protection. Bullets slap into the side panelling. One punches through the passenger door and shreds the seat beside you. You don't flinch anymore. You're too tired to flinch. You just keep driving. There's shouting on the radio, but the signal is scrambled, half cut by static and screams. Someone calls out a location, then cuts off mid-word. You hear the word mine, and then nothing. Your eyes scan the road ahead, but it all looks the same. Dust, rock, faint tyre grooves from the truck ahead. You keep your wheels in the ruts like you were trained, praying that the last guy didn't get it wrong. Then the truck ahead of you jerks violently. One moment it's fine, the next it lifts at an angle, one side ballooning upward as the wheel disappears in a column of dust and flame. The sound is deafening. A flash, then the stench, burnt rubber, oil, flesh. The cab splits like an overripe fruit. Debris rains down across the road. The rear axle skids sideways. Then the whole thing crumples. You swerve, barely in time, your tyres kicking up gravel. A piece of twisted metal bounces off your hood. You're breathing too hard. Your hands are slick on the wheel. You feel something warm on your cheek and realise you've been cut. You don't remember when. Your ears are ringing. You can't hear the engine anymore. You're not even sure it's running. You just know you're still moving. And still, no one stops. Trucks behind you pull wide around the wreck. Engines whining. No one gets out. No one checks. No one even looks for long. The only rule is keep moving. Because if you stop, you become the next wreck on the side of the road. You become another smoking chassis. Another black smear of burnt rubber and blood. You become a problem someone else is told not to think about. You pass close enough to see the cab. What's left of it? The front is gone. Just gone. The rest is mangled, burning, wheels still spinning slightly. You catch a glimpse of a boot, torn from the leg, caught in the gear housing. A gloved hand protrudes from under the wreckage, unmoving. It takes you a second to realise it's someone you knew. Not well, not closely, but enough to recognise the patch on his sleeve. Enough to know you'd nodded to him that morning. You think about stopping. Just for a second, just long enough to check. But there's shouting behind you now, horns blaring. You feel the vibration, of another truck coming fast. There's no room to pull over. No time to turn around. And even if there was, what would you do? There's nothing to save, nothing to carry, nothing left but parts. So you keep going. The road stretches ahead, blurry with smoke. The sky above is still alive with engine noise. Somewhere behind you, more shells are falling. You don't look back. You grip the wheel tighter and lean forward, teeth clenched, jaw locked, eyes stinging from dust and sweat, and something else that doesn't need a name. You keep moving. Because you were told to. Because there's no alternative. Because the sky hates you too. You drive for hours after the ambush, though time has lost all meaning. The road keeps going. The noise keeps fading. The dust settles eventually, but your hands don't stop shaking. You try to replay the moment. Where the sniper was, how close the blast came, who didn't make it out, but your brain won't hold the pieces together anymore. It drops them, one by one, like bolts from a shaking hand. When the convoy stops for the night, you don't get out. You stay in the cab, eyes open, heart thudding like the engine used to. You stare at the inside of the windshield until morning. And when someone knocks to say it's time to move, you nod and shift into gear. That run wasn't your last, but it was the last one that felt like anything. After that, it all blurred. Miles, assignments, faces, cargo stamped urgent, but never explained. Somewhere between one depot and the next, the sky went quiet and the shells stopped falling. Not because peace had arrived, just because you weren't worth aiming at anymore. You'd survived, technically. Eventually, you learn the war is over, not because anyone told you, not because there was a ceremony, or a final trumpet blast, or a neat little line drawn under it all. You just wake up one morning to a cold breakfast and a different tone in your officer's voice. Not lighter, just quieter. There's no more screaming, no more rush, just a vague sense of waiting. You ask what comes next. No one seems to know. You still have a truck. You still have cargo, so you drive. You've been driving for nearly 3 years now. France, Burma, Russia. Wherever they needed someone who didn't flinch when the brakes failed. Peace, it turns out, is just war with less noise. The bullets stop flying, but the work doesn't. If anything, it gets worse. Now you're hauling building supplies instead of ammunition, transporting boxes of food no one packed properly, delivering mail to outposts that haven't been told the fighting's over. The roads are still cratered, the bridges are still out, the trucks are still falling apart. You still sleep in the dirt. The only difference is that you're not being actively hunted, which doesn't mean you're safe. It just means your death would be an accident now instead of a statistic. You keep driving. For weeks, then months. Some units go home. The lucky ones. The ones who knew someone, or had the right kind of job, or who didn't look too broken. But drivers? Drivers stay. Someone has to carry the crates. Someone has to make sure the wheels don't stop turning. You are never here for glory. Just momentum. The faces around you start changing. Some are new recruits, shipped in too late to see action. Others are leftovers like you, too damaged to redeploy, but not damaged enough to discharge. You stop learning names, stop asking where they're from. They look at you like a ghost, like someone who's seen the thing they've only heard about. They want stories, they want adventure. You give them silence. You're too tired to offer anything else. Civilians start to show up. Journalists, clerks, people in clean uniforms who smell like soap. They ask polite questions about how it all went, then look disappointed when your answers aren't about heroism or decisive battles. They want tales of firefights, of close calls and noble sacrifices. Not fuel manifests, not frostbite, not the way a brake line snaps in -20 and sends a man off a cliff without even a scream. They want noise and drama. You give them mud and gears and silence. They stop asking. There's no parade. Not for you. Parades are for the infantry, the aces, the units with flags and songs. You don't have a flag. You don't even have a proper insignia. There's no song about the guy who changed his own oil with a bent spoon, and slept beneath his truck to stay out of the rain. No medals for delivering bandages or hauling 6 tons of boots across France. No mention in the dispatches for the man who kept the fuel flowing, who drove through machine gun fire with a truck full of tyres. What you get is paperwork, a clipboard shoved into your hands, a discharge form with half your name spelled wrong, a handshake from a man who doesn't know you and doesn't care to. They tell you to return your gear, the boots you've worn through, the jacket that still smells like smoke, the dog tags that hang from your neck like a weight. You ask what happens next. They shrug. That's someone else's problem. You leave the motor pool the same way you entered it, unnoticed, no salute, no fanfare, just the sound of engines idling and a dozen men shouting over each other about schedules, fuel loads, and broken axles. You pass your truck on the way out. Not the same one. That was lost somewhere outside Minsk, but a truck just like it. Same dented hood, same cracked windshield, same aura of barely contained resentment. A younger man is climbing into the driver's seat. He doesn't look at you. You don't blame him. You find a train headed west. It's crowded, loud, and full of people who talk too much. They laugh about things that aren't funny. They complain about the food, the seats, the smell. You stare out the window and try not to listen. You've forgotten how to be around people who weren't born out of the same misery. You can't join their conversations. You can't smile at their jokes. You still twitch at loud noises. You still flinch when the brakes squeal. When you arrive, the city looks the same as you left it, just older. The buildings are all still standing. The sidewalks are still cracked. The signs haven't changed, but everything feels smaller now. The streets are too narrow, the houses too fragile, the people too loud. You walk through it like a ghost, feet blistered in your issued boots, shoulders hunched from months of bad posture and bad roads. No one greets you, no one's waiting. You never sent letters and no one thought to ask where you'd gone. You're just another face in a long line of returning men, most of whom blend back into the world like ink into water. You try to do the same. But the world has no place for truck drivers who've only ever known how to keep moving. You try to find work. It's harder than you expected. No one wants a man who lists convoy duty under experience. You don't have references. You don't have skills that translate. You know how to drive something that barely works through terrain that barely exists. You know how to ration coffee grounds and filter water through a sock. You know how to sleep sitting up and how to wake up fast when an engine noise doesn't sound right. No one's hiring for that. You get a room, small, cheap, cold. You hang your coat by the door. It still smells like diesel. You sit on the bed and stare at your hands. They shake a little. You think they always will. You cough into a rag and check for blood. Just a habit now. There's nothing left in your lungs, just dust and memory. Your discharge papers are tucked in your bag, along with a canteen you forgot to return and a letter you never sent. You read the papers again. They don't say much, just your name, your rank, and the word complete. That's all your war amounted to. One word. You lie down. The bed's too soft. You miss the sound of engines, the hard curve of a wheel beneath your hands, the angry clatter of bolts in an overworked chassis. You miss the road, even if it never missed you. You're discharged quietly. No one asks what you did. No one remembers the man who kept the bullets moving. Years later, the history books closed without your name. No one ever wrote it down. It wasn't engraved on any monument. It wasn't included in the credits of the war films they kept making. There was no medal in a drawer. No framed photo on a wall. What you did, what you survived, faded with time, like tread marks in the dirt. Eventually, even you stopped talking about it. You tried once or twice, but no one really wanted to hear about fuel leaks and brake failures. They wanted noise, action, glory, not exhaustion. You lived longer than you expected. Not well, but long. Your back never recovered. Your knees gave out early. The cough lingered for decades. You never married. You didn't see the point. Most of your post-war years were spent driving. Delivery trucks mostly. It was what you knew. The machines were better, but the feeling was the same. Long roads, late hours. No one to talk to but the hum of the engine and the sound of your own breath. Most of your old convoy died before you. A few in peacetime accidents. A few from the war that never really ended. The frostbitten toes that went gangrenous. The lungs that collapsed. The dreams that turned into screams. You never saw any of them again. You stopped expecting to. You often wondered how many were buried under the wrong name, or no name at all. You didn't get visitors toward the end. The neighbours knew you as the quiet one. The old man with the limp who sat on the porch in a threadbare coat. Even in summer. A few of them offered help once. You turned them down. You didn't need much. You'd learned how to do without a long time ago. You still ate too little, slept too little, moved slowly. You listened to the trucks on the nearby highway, and sometimes closed your eyes just for a moment, imagining the route they were on, the weight they carried, the distance left to go. You died in winter, in your sleep, alone. No pain, no sound. Just cold air in your lungs, and tired bones finally giving out. No one found you for 2 days. When they did, it was quiet. Just a knock unanswered, a welfare check, a report filed. There wasn't much in the apartment. A pair of worn boots, a patched coat, a drawer full of rusted tools, and old rations you'd never quite stopped stocking. In the back of a closet, someone found a satchel. Inside was a faded map, stained with oil and time. A black and white photograph of a convoy, faces blurred. A medal with no name engraved on it. The funeral was small. A few chairs, a chaplain who never knew you. A cold wind cutting through a half-empty cemetery. They got your branch of service right. Not much else. The eulogy was brief. It spoke of sacrifice, of duty, of quiet strength, all the usual words. But nothing about the truck. Nothing about the frostbitten fingers wrapped around a frozen steering wheel. Nothing about the engine fires or the tyre blowouts, or the nights you spent shivering under the chassis. Too cold to dream. No one told the story of the time you kept a convoy moving through shell fire with only one functioning gear. No one remembered the names of the drivers who disappeared along the Burma Road, or the ones buried in shallow ditches outside Stalingrad, or the ones who drowned in swamps near Bastogne when their wheels slid just a little too far to the left. No one mentioned the fact that your war never had a beginning or an end, just a direction, forward. You had never expected to be remembered. That wasn't bitterness, just fact. You weren't the kind of man who got statues. You were the kind who kept things moving so someone else could win the war. You drove through rain, through sleet, through mud that reached your knees and ice that sealed your boots to the pedals. You drove through bombing runs and sniper fire and curves with no guardrails and no brakes. You drove when the maps were wrong, when the engine smoked, when your lungs bled. You drove when no one else could. And when it was over, you were quietly discharged, quietly forgotten, quietly replaced. You drove through mud, fire, and hell. And when you were gone, all anyone remembered was that the ammo showed up. Not how, not who, just that it arrived, somehow. That brings us to the end of tonight's journey. Slow, rattling, and worn thin by time, like the tyres on a truck no one remembers driving. If you're still awake, thank you for riding through frost, fire, and fatigue with a man built to be forgotten. If you'd like early access to more of these long, quiet descents into the overlooked parts of history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other forgotten corners of history you'd like to see covered. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S. and Amanda Lamke. Sleep well.